A few persons are now swept up in a whirlwind of terrifying revelations as a result of a once hidden secret that has suddenly burst open. The chilling story of Holly Klaus from Oklahoma has surfaced from the depths of a cold case that lasted over 40 years, revealing a terrifying timeline of incidents that rocked the small town to its foundation. The murder of Holly's parents, Harold Dean Klaus and Tina Galen, and the unceremonious disposal of their dead bodies in the woods east of Houston in 1981, seemed to seal the fate of Holly's sudden disappearance as an unsolved case. But, despite everything, a startling turn of events has brought this puzzling case back into the public eye when Holly Klaus is found 41 years later, giving her grieving family hope for explanations and justice. Welcome back to Mystery Detective, your go-to channel for spooky solved, unsolved cases, and dark mysteries from around the world. In today's video, we want to look at how time sped forward, healing the scars of loss and turning them into fading memories. Holly's case appeared in the distant past on the vast timeline of history, breaking through the formerly impenetrable veil of obscurity. She is the lost daughter who has now been found. Holly's discovery, however, brought up even more questions than it did solutions. Where has Holly been for the past 4 decades, and who killed her parents, Harold and Tina? We go back in time to a chilly winter day on January 12, 1981, in the vast wilderness of northern Harris County, Texas, just outside the bustling boundaries of Houston City. That day, a civilian's dog decided to venture out into the eerie woods, only to return with the terrifying remains of a human arm in its jaw. Its skin was rotting, telling a terrible story about what was concealed among the dense vegetation. The frantic search that followed this grisly discovery revealed a dark secret concealed in the dense forest close to Wallaceville Road. As the sun bounced off the tall trees, it created an erratic pattern of shadows that deceived the eye. The only sound in this silent, desolate woods came from the skeleton leaves being crunched under the civilian foot and the dog's poo. The sound of the dog barking in the distance broke the stillness of the woods. The perplexing dog worked furiously to unearth something from a heap beneath a massive old tree. The civilian observed the dog's frenzied excitement, intense anticipation, its tail whipped from side to side. The civilian felt shivers run through his soul as he came to a terrifying realization. Beneath the deceiving covering of fallen leaves was a shallow grave harboring the grim death of 2 bodies, interlaced and neatly placed beside each other. The gravity of this gruesome discovery weighed heavily on the civilian's mind. He ran recklessly in the direction of the closest phone booth and dialed 911. Because of the shock of the discovery, his voice was trembling as he spoke to the operator at the other end of the line. The couple's decayed bodies lied in the dark greenery, only a few feet apart. Their bodies tragically bore the impact of time, giving in to decay and wearing away. This stipulated that they had been dead for a couple of months. Both bodies had been concealed in the woods just 100 yards from Wallaceville Road. When investigators arrived on the scene, they were looking for any hints that might help them determine who the deceased were. They came across a horrifying scene. They identified the first body to be a young woman between the ages of 15 and 25. She was between 5'4" and 5'9" tall. She was white with possible Native American blend. Her body was found close to a pair of green running shorts, and she had long reddish-brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. The woman had been choked to death. She was covered in a bloody towel and was otherwise naked. Although no additional clothing was discovered at the scene, detectives noted that the woman probably had a gap in her teeth and had short, stubby nails. A young man's body believed to be between 20 and 30 years old lay next to her, though it was possible that he was as young as 15, since it was in the 1980s. They did not have the same forensic advancements that exist today. He was between 5 feet 4 and 5'8" feet tall. He was white and had brown hair and eyes. The man's neck showed signs of degeneration in the upper vertebrae, which may have been caused by a previous injury. He had prominent eyebrows, and his wisdom teeth had either been extracted or had not yet fully developed. According to the investigators, the victim had been beaten to death after being stripped, bound, and gagged. Investigators in Harris County were left with many unanswered questions following the shocking discovery of these two young people. Who were these people, and what circumstances led to their tragic end? Investigators hope to be able to solve this mystery as they continue to piece together the available evidence. As if the discovery of the two decaying bodies in these woods wasn't terrifying enough, the neighborhood was shocked when a third body was found there 18 months later. This time, it was the body of 15-year-old Michelle Garvey, who had been missing for a month. Michelle had been sexually assaulted and strangled. Her life was violently taken away from her in a cruel manner. It was obvious that Michelle's body had been there for some time when investigators arrived at the scene because neither shoes nor a bra were to be found. The mystery surrounding the tragic deaths of these young people was further complicated by the fact that Michelle's body was found in the exact same location as the earlier discovered bodies. This only increased the sense of unease in the neighborhood as many people began to wonder if there was a link between Michelle's death and the deaths of the two previously found bodies. The task ahead of them was daunting, but investigators were determined to find the answers to the numerous questions that remained after these shocking revelations. The other two bodies that were discovered before Michelle's were not immediately identified, but Michelle was. To reconstruct the couple found in the woods, forensic artist Mary Mace was hired to do the job, in the hopes that someone would come forward with information about their identities. The reconstruction was widely disseminated, but no one came forward with any helpful leads. The investigators had to file the case away as unsolved because there were so few clues to continue with the investigation. 30 years later, in 2011, it was decided to exhume the bodies of the unidentified couple in order to gather DNA samples. This resulted in yet another dead end, and the investigation was closed. Then, in January 2022, new information was discovered in a twist that nobody anticipated. The case of the unidentified couple discovered in the Houston woods has finally made some headway after 41 long years of unsolved mysteries. In 2022, the challenging task of identifying the two bodies was assigned to forensic scientist Allison Peacock of FHD Forensics. She and her team got to work, entering the DNA data into the National Database of Genetic Profiles called GEDmatch. They were shocked to learn of a match to the male victim's cousin who lived in Kentucky. After getting in touch with him, they finally were able to identify the two people who had been discovered buried in the woods as 17-year-old Tina Gale Klaus, formerly known as Tina Galen, and her husband, 21-year-old Harold Dean Klaus. The year 1978 saw a destined meeting of Harold Dean Klaus Jr. and Tina Galen in the blissful Florida community of New Smyrna Beach. When she was only 15, young Tina found herself drawn to the slightly older Harold Dean, who was 19 years old at the time. In an ironic turn of events, their families were already intertwined because Tina's brother and Harold's sister had started a relationship of their own. Harold and Tina were caught up in a whirlwind of romance that picked them up and carried them quickly to the Volusia County Courthouse under Florida's colorful skies. They exchanged marriage vows there on June 25, 1979, cementing their ardent love. The birth of Holly Marie Klaus on January 24, 1980, was a sign of their ardent love and dedication to one another. Despite being young, Harold and Tina were admired by their friends and family for their unwavering commitment to parenthood. As the 1980s began to take shape, Harold and Tina bid a fond farewell to the well-known Florida shores. They focused their attention on a new life and ventured into the sweltering heat of Lewisville, Texas, a developing suburb buzzing with the promise of prosperity. Harold, a master woodworker who lived in the vibrant energy of the Dallas metropolitan area, had his sights set on taking advantage of the construction boom that swept the area in the early 1980s. The couple had high hopes for a prosperous future in the Texan trade industry thanks to Harold's skills as a skilled cabinet maker. According to their devoted relatives back home, their relationship remained without a scratch. There were no arguments or tensions. The couple's relationship appeared to be hidden by a perfect harmony. They kept their loved ones informed of their Texan journey through regular phone calls. However, in October 1980, as the autumn leaves started to fall, an unsettling silence soon descended upon the familial phone lines connecting Harold and Tina with their families. The happy chatter suddenly stopped, leaving a jarring silence with a sinister air of mystery. It was unknown what had happened to the couple in the months that had followed. Their killer or killers as well was still a mystery. But perhaps the investigators would finally be able to learn the truth since their identities were finally established. Their demise is thought to have taken place between October 1980 and January 1981. When Allison Peacock contacted the families, Harold's mother provided them with their first tip. She explained that toward the end of December 1980, a sister named Susan called to let them know that Tina and Harold had joined their little religious community and no longer desired to communicate with their families. Sister Susan then requested $1,000 to transport the couple's car, a red 1978 AMC Concord, back to Florida as part of the group's requirements for joining. Clearly concerned for Harold and Tina's safety, the family made the decision to call the police. They were instructed by the police to indulge Susan. Finally, a man and two women showed up at the racetrack Daytona in Florida to receive $1,000 in exchange for the car. The three people were immediately detained by police as soon as the family received the car. At the time, a police report was made for this operation. Unfortunately, the 1980 police report has not yet been located, which poses a serious obstacle for the investigation. When Harold's sister brought up the missing baby during the same conversation, Allison's heart sank. In their investigation, that particular detail had never surfaced. There had already been so many twists and turns in the case, and now there might be a missing child. After taking a deep breath, Allison made a promise to Harold's sister that they would do everything possible to discover what had happened to the baby. Allison learned that Harold and Tina did indeed have a child as she investigated the situation further. A kid called Holly Klaus. When her parents disappeared, she was only a few months old, and she was never seen or heard from again. Allison was adamant about learning what had become of Holly, but it seemed like an overwhelming task. Investigators began a thorough national search for Holly because they were driven to learn the truth. But they had to first figure out how to spell her name. Although some detectives dismissed it as a minor problem, Allison Peacock knew that getting the name correct was essential to locating her. Allison and Harold's sister asked for access to her birth record from Florida's Department of Vital Records to determine the proper spelling, but they were turned down. This started a difficult and uphill battle, in which the authorities rejected each request for the record. Peacock and her group, though, were unyielding. Before eventually receiving access to Holly's birth certificate, investigators worked their way up the ranks of those involved in the case, from detectives to senior prosecutors, judges, and finally, attorney generals from 3 different states. They soon learned that Holly had been adopted by a family nearby. She had grown up and was going about her life, completely oblivious to her disastrous past. Holly's birth certificate was sealed in the United States, which is why it was difficult to obtain. Following an adoption, it is common practice to seal birth certificates, making it challenging to obtain a copy of the record, except through a court order. This also implies that the birth certificate is accompanied by an adoption certificate. It was Allison P. Cox's unwavering persistence in locating Holly's name's proper spelling that allowed for the eventual acquisition of the birth certificate. Whether it was merely a coincidence or a deliberate action is unknown. But the truth is that Holly might not have been found without Allison's commendable efforts. After this discovery, the police descended on Holly's workplace and learned her origin story, which they had painstakingly uncovered from a maze of lost paperwork and neglected archives. Holly, Harold and Tina's daughter, who is now 42 and a mother of 5, who lives in Oklahoma, was finally reunited with her remaining biological family as the investigators continued to delve deeper into the mysterious case of Harold and Tina. Everyone involved was happy and relieved because they had long given up on ever finding her. But there are still many unanswered questions about the circumstances surrounding her adoption. The case was far from over, despite the excitement of the moment. Holly's parents were murdered, and the identity of the murderer is still a mystery, as are the circumstances surrounding Holly's adoption. Investigators soon found out that 2 women who belonged to a nomadic religious group had left Holly at a church in Arizona. These women were barefoot and wore robes. Their religion remained a mystery because the officials were reluctant to provide any information. However, they did reveal that the group believed in veganism and thought that men and women should be kept apart. The religious group is known to have visited Arizona, California, and possibly Texas while touring the southern United States. The group was reportedly seen in the early 1980s around Yuma, Arizona, with its female members begging for food. The case appeared to have all the elements of a classic detective story, with plenty of leads to pursue but no obvious solutions. Holly's amazing discovery had only raised more issues and led to dead ends, with no clear solution in sight. Holly's extraordinary discovery had untangled a thread that led down a maze of questions. Her complicated adoption history started to come into focus as the murky role of a roving religious sect became clear. Detectives nevertheless reaffirmed their dedication to the investigation, strengthened by their belief that the religious organization was the key to cracking this unsolved case. They showed firm commitment to uncovering the truth in order to bring Holly and her biological roots some form of justice. We are faced with an unknown that is full of enticing secrets that are just waiting to be revealed. We wait for shocking revelations, the echoes of the past growing louder with each passing moment. This investigation into the history of the mysterious and unsolved has only just begun, so there is still much to learn. Subscribe and stay connected with us to get an update on the case when the detectives finally crack the mystery behind Harold and Tina's death. Thank you for watching. Please stay safe and alert for the next mystery to be unraveled.